YouTube battle community, Beach Boys fans, random people on the internet. My name is Giggens, and we are here today to talk about the Beach Boys' second album, the smash of an album, Surfin' U.S.A. Their second album, released March 25th, 1963. At this point, the Beach Boys were just a brand new band. They were really just getting started, and they were going on tour basically throughout California, and they were still a group. You know, what you hear on the album is what you saw on stage, and those were the same guys. So, I absolutely love this album. This happens to be an original mono copy from 1963, and it really is just a cool album. The design on the front is awesome. You know, I love the text, I love the picture, just the wave. I mean, the whole thing about it just screams, look at me. So, like, when you're looking at the shelf in 1963, you see this thing sticking out at you. I mean, who wouldn't want to pick this up? And you look at the back and check out these cool surfer dudes that didn't surf, but one of them did. Yeah, I really dig this album, and I think it needs to get more credit than it deserves. I think a lot of the early Beach Boys albums deserve more credit than they get. It's easy to toss them off as being like, surf stuff, but like, there's a lot of talent going on behind this from basically a group of teenagers that had just gotten together and kind of like, fell into being a band. There's a lot of talent here, and the growth on this album compared to Surfin' Safari, which would lead to the next album with Surfer Girl, and Little Deuce Coupe, and all those next couple of albums is phenomenal. There's some tracks on here that are absolutely mind-blowing with how talented and the composition of the tracks and everything, how it's laid out, really far out. So on the cover, you got a guy named Leslie Williams who was surfing away in January 1960 in Oahu, Hawaii. It was going to be used for like Surfin' or Surfer magazine, but I guess the original picture got destroyed. And when the guys at Capitol were putting this thing together, they wanted the picture of a surfer dude, and they contacted this guy, and he sold it. They were able to put the picture back together again and get the colors corrected or something, and did that. So you got this excellent shot of this guy riding this humongous wave. It just totally captures your imagination. So this album in particular, Nick Vanette still was kind of like hanging around in the producer's booth, but it's basically Brian and Murray at this point, mostly Brian. And Brian was coming up with a lot of tricks that he was learning from just watching and trying. Double tracking the vocals was like a new thing for them, and it totally changed the sound of the band. It made them sound more full and more dense, and really kind of broadened their scope in terms of creating a really decent track. And they started recording at Western Studios, Western Recorders, which is where Brian would stay for many years. He loved that place. He loved the sound of it, the acoustics, the way the music bounced off the walls, and the vibe, the vibrations that were there. He really was digging that. So this album started off, in the wake of 10 Little Indians actually peaking on the charts from the previous album. Hit number 49 in January of '63. And that's when the guys started recording this album. And most of this album was recorded over, 8 or 9 different days. Like, it was just nothing compared to what eventually would come to be, even with Good Vibrations being one song taking months to do, hours worth of time for a track that's, 2 minutes and 50 seconds, whatever it is. This whole album was basically like, here's our songs that we have. They're pretty simple. Let's put them down. We got the feeling going. So yeah, they started going to Western. One of the first things they recorded was a track called Punchline, which I had actually forgotten about. It's on the 30 Years of Good Vibrations box set. It was unreleased until then, but I remember hearing that song a lot as a kid. My best friend and I would listen to that CD back when it came out, that box set back when it came out, and I remember them just laughing over and over again, and we just loved that track, hearing them laugh. So yeah, they started the album basically recording that track, which, wasn't released. January 5th, they went back to the studio to record the proper beginnings of what became this album. Right off the bat, they did Surfin' U.S.A., Shut Down, Farmer's Daughter, and Lana. The two last songs there were kind of like early versions of what they'd finish up later on throughout January. On January 12th, their previous album, Surfin' Safari, peaked at number 32 on the charts, which is pretty cool. So they felt pretty good about what was happening here. Like, things were really picking up some speed. Playing all these shows and getting some exposure and being on the radio and really blowing up the local area was really starting to hit them here. and things would just explode even more when Surfin' USA became a single and eventually was released. Um, January 16th, they had a very rare recording session in New York where they did Farmer's Daughter and Lana again. But these tracks didn't go anywhere. They weren't happy with the feel of them, and they were basically just discarded and forgotten about. But one of the very few times they ever recorded out of California, and it happened this early in their career, I think is pretty fascinating. Um, January 18th, 1963, Brian and a couple of guys recorded a song called Ride Away, which still remains unreleased. Basically, Brian played a bunch of instruments, including guitar, which I find fascinating because he didn't touch the guitar that much, if at all. So I'm kind of interested to hear how that turned out. There's a guy named Steve Douglas and Ed Hall who played saxophone and drums, respectively, on that song. February 11th, they ended up doing a handful of tracks. Let's Go Trippin', Honky Tonk, Misery Lou, and Noble Surfer all kind of poured out on one day. February 12th was Surf Jam and Stoked to finish off the album there. And in this time, in between the months of January and March, they had met Jan and Dean for the first time and became Jan and Dean's backing band when they would play shows together. So they would do they'd open and then be the same band for Jan and Dean. They'd have to fill up all the time. These promoters wanted a certain amount of time and a certain amount of music played, and sometimes they didn't have enough music to play. And Jan and Dean actually at one point said, "Hey, you guys went on first. Let's just go back out and play Surfin' and Surfin' Safari or Surfin' USA, and let's just do that again." And the crowd ate it up, and they loved it. And their chemistry and their friendship completely bonded from there on out. And they were all good buddies after that, to the point where Brian actually gave Surf City to Jan and Dean. And after showing them Surfin' USA, Jan and Dean were like, "Can we have that one?" Brian was like, "Nah, I'm going to hang on to that for myself, but you can have this one," which ended up being a #1, which certainly pissed off Murray. But anyways, yeah, so they became really good friends. And everything blew up from them. Surfin' USA was a humongous song when it came out. The track itself, I think, hit #3. It was their first top 10 hit. It was an absolute smash for them. It really gave them national exposure. Surfin' Safari album and singles came out for that album were basically California based and local kind of scene, the local radio station and stuff. They were known around there. When Surfin' USA came out, it was a big deal. They even got on the Steve Allen show and did Surfin' USA and a song called Things We Did Last Summer. And they're dressed up in these cool striped shirts with these big flared bell bottom, navy bell bottoms, and all their hair pushed back, and they're just having a groovy little time in 1963. So it's fun to watch that video. Also, around the time that this album was about to come out, Jan and Dean ended up doing their own version of Surfin' and Surfin' Safari as a single, with the Beach Boys doing the instrumentation and the backing vocals, which is pretty cool. So Jan and Dean kind of jumped onto the surf bandwagon right around the same time the Beach Boys were picking up some steam. Because Jan and Dean had been around for a little bit. They had a couple of songs, Linda was a pretty big song for them. And they wanted to come out with an album called Jan and Dean Take Linda Surfing, and they wanted to have this whole surfing vibe. And Brian was totally behind it, and they really became good buddies. And around March 7th, right before the album was about to come out, and basically after the album was finished, they recorded a song called Baker Man, which showed up on the CD in 1990 as a bonus track, or 2001 as a bonus track, and a song called Side 2, which has never been released. So that'd be cool to hear that. Right after this album came out is when Brian started to not want to do shows anymore. It's we're only 2 albums in, and Brian's like, this is hurting my ears. I just want to write and record, and you guys can do that stuff. I'll go on TV if it's local, but you guys go do that. And so basically that's when Al came back around April. And around this time also, Denny had started, to do more crazy stuff, and he ended up smashing his Corvair and hurting his legs, and a guy named Mark Grosclose, I think I'm pronouncing his last name correctly, came in to play drums for the Beach Boys for a little bit as Denny recovered. And then Mark and David went on to have a couple bands together, including Dave and the Marksmen and a band with no name. If you check out Dave and the Marksmen, there's a fantastic song called I Wanna Cry, which came out in late '64, and it sounds like nothing of that time. It's amazing how ahead of his time he was, and how truly amazing of a songwriter he was, and completely underappreciated, I think he is, and especially his guitar playing and his songwriting. But to hear his growth as well, I think it's just as important. And so if you get a chance, go on YouTube, check out Dave and the Marksmen. There's some really great tracks there. So Yeah. With that said, let's jump into this thing. So, the album peaked at number 2 in the U.S., and it came out in 1965 in England, where it peaked at number 17. But the album opens with the classic Surfin' USA, based off the Chuck Berry song Sweet Little 16. Brian was driving around with his girlfriend at the time, and I think it was his girlfriend's brother was a surfer. And Brian just came up with this idea about surfing spots. And so he asked the guy about all these surfing spots that he would go to, and Brian got this list and just went nuts with it. Basically took Sweet Little 16, changed it to be about surfing, and that was it. And for a while, they got away with it until Chuck Berry and his team was like, that's my song. So after this, it says, credit Brian Wilson, Mike Love, Chuck Berry. Which is pretty cool. But Chuck was a big fan of the song himself. He really did like it. He told Carl, I guess they ran into each other at some point in the 60s, and he told Carl he really liked it. So, that's great, because they were all humongous fans of Chuck Berry. Chuck Berry invented rock and roll, so, if it wasn't for him, there'd be no Beach Boys. So, it's kind of like a tip of the hat to him, really, to incorporate their current style with their influences. So, pretty cool. But that magical intro, that sparkling, glistening, clean guitar tone that just completely strikes a nerve in you. Unbelievable intro. It's based off Sweet Little 16, but it's their own drippy, syrupy surf style, and it completely grabs your attention. It's an amazing introduction. If they released just that introduction, that alone would have been super cool. But then you get into the rest of the song, and it really is an absolute smash of a song. That picking of the guitar and the rhythm, some of that metallic hitting. So when you got your pick and you're kind of like hitting some of the sides of the strings and kind of like, not muting fully with your palm, but like you're going for a certain feel that is completely on its own, as opposed to just like strumming away. You're going for a tight sort of plucking feel. And they accomplished that amazingly. Dave and Carl's guitar styles blending together to create that surf sound. Holy moly, it's amazing. The construction of the chorus, the inside, outside U.S.A. and Mike's vocals on top of it, the group as a whole is completely on fire. Yeah, they're doing a version of Sweet Little 16, but they're doing the Beach Boys. And, nothing gets more classic than that sound. It's a surf anthem, and it's an absolute phenomenal song. Really, if you sit down and just re-listen to it, it really is an amazing song. Even if it is a slight ripoff, but that dancey organ, that on fire guitar solo that only lasts for a couple of seconds completely grabs your attention. Love this song, man. It's such a good song. When it came out, it was backed with Shutdown as the B-side. Even Shutdown charted on its own, too. I think that charted like number 23 somewhere on the charts, because at that time, radio stations, the A's and B's would get switched around and things would chart, which is pretty cool. Farmer's Daughter is the second song on here. This is a really interesting lead from Brian. I think even this song, as simple as it sounds, was streets ahead of what they were doing on Surfin' Safari. And I really love Brian's really sweet vocal. He's got a really nice tone to his voice, and when the guys jump in, it's just a nice, balanced, warm feeling throughout this whole thing. Diddy's kind of tapping away the whole time, and for me, his drumming steals the show on this one, along with Brian's lead, because that tapping beat really keeps the momentum going and really sticks out a lot on this particular track anyway. The humming solo is very unique. That's a total anomaly in the Beach Boys catalog. You don't get that much of anywhere. And the guitars on this one are muted. So for me, the guitars are almost like a percussive element added to the drums. They don't really stick out. They don't really shine. You don't really know that they're there, but they're muted really well. And again, I think that plays very nicely against the lyrics and the singing itself. Misery Lou is the next song on here. Misery Lou. I'm not sure how you pronounce this thing, but just an absolute amazing track. The tide is high, the surf is up. You got this guy rocking and rolling through this thing. It's got that real crisp, tense, shimmering, glimmering guitar. The precision, the execution, the drama behind it. The energy is so well performed. And then you remember, these guys are teenagers. Like, I couldn't play the guitar for beans when I was 17, let alone pull off, like, Dick Dale sounding stuff. And they do it so expertly. Because Carl and Dave have been playing together for years at this point, since they were even younger kids. So they knew how to bounce off each other. They knew when to take cues from each other. They knew how to follow each other and really make an amazing track. Um, the sting in the clean guitars is just phenomenal. Absolute great song. Stoked, another instrumental song, except for the guys yelling "Stoked" every once in a while. The Beach Boys instrumental stuff that they wrote, I think, is even better than their covers. Bar for "Let's Go Trippin'," which I think is fantastic, but their originals like "Stoked" and "Surf Jam," it's got their energy, it's got their vibe. They knew they were doing their own thing. They weren't covering somebody else. It was their own something to say. This was their voice. This was their way to get it out. For this song on "Stoked," for me, it's got a real like angular guitar approach, really chunky plucking throughout this thing. The style is totally giving off that slinky feel of being inside a wave. And like, I mean, I've never surfed, but like I could imagine being inside a wave and hearing that echo of you're under the water and you're slowly or fastly going through it. And that feeling of that like water dripping and how they take that feel and that sound and make it happen through a guitar. It sounds like the guitars are syrupy or they're wet or they're drenched in that reverb, and it creates that feeling of being in a wave. And that's the whole point of the surf sound. But it's amazing to hear them do that as teenagers. There's a talent there that is unbelievable. So yeah, great song. I love hearing the guys yell "Stoked" over and over again once in a while. Then you get "Lonely Sea." Where the hell did that come from? Like, you got these like light songs, and then this dark, melancholy, somber, emotional, deep song from Brian. And it's like, where the hell did that come from? Like, this guy was so young. This is like, how did you write something like that? This was obviously a precursor to what was to come later on, but his vocals are almost reminiscent of Pet Sound sounding Brian. I don't know how he would have written something like this so young and so early. He's singing most of it on his own, but when the guys come in, that moment the guys come in is pure magic. Absolute magic when that happens. Mike's bass on this song, I think, is fantastic. And having the other guys mixed in to create that blend is such a unique feel and a unique track. It sticks out, and then it's got its own little life. It doesn't sound like anything else at that time. It sounds like a Brian Wilson song, which came to be his trademark. But at that time, he was basically just this new guy on the scene writing some songs. So to execute something like that at such a young age and have it sound so gripping and emotional is truly something to obviously keep an eye on, like this guy would become. And then you got his Elvis moment in the middle there, where he's kind of doing that talk thing to the song, which I really think is cool. But an absolute classic track. It's probably one of the Beach Boys' first classic songs that really show off their talents as artists. It's not them going for the hit single. It's not them going for the fun dancing track when they're playing shows. They're making art with this song, which would just show the depth of what Brian and the guys as a whole could do. And then Shutdown comes on, and you're like, what the hell is this? So you get that deep, echoey, reverb vibe, this humongously tense, morose, not morose, but like somber feel, and then Shutdown, tack it up, buddy, gonna shut him down, comes on. Super tight, super clean production. You got Dennis's amazing drum fills like that happen over and over in early Beach Boys songs, which I really like. And it's just a fantastic song. I mean, I think Mike's vocals on this thing are just great. The lead vocal about drag racing, and the guys jump in once in a while. The sax solo really is cool, with a little bit of that drippy reverb guitar coming in a little bit here and there. Just a great song. Just a fun pop song, man. Can't go wrong with Shutdown. Side 2 starts off with Noble Surfer, and Dennis's classic role introduces this track about a guy who just can't get enough of the surf, man. His whole life is dedicated to this thing. We ain't joshin'. He's number one. I love the background vocals on this thing. Really fun track. I don't think it's meant to be, one of the greatest hits of the Beach Boys or something, but it definitely shows them building a song and constructing a song and putting their talents to work and showing what they can do, leading to what would become, their classic sound. But to hear them do it at such an early age, it just speaks volumes of what they were capable Honky Tonk. So this song is cool. Kind of a bluesy country picking style that leads into some shimmering guitar leads that have a real like elasticy, rubbery vibe to them. Eventually, you got that vibrant surf style. Again, it's just that magical guitar interplay between Carl and Dave that just totally works. Like I said before, they knew how to play off each other and they do it really well. Lana, really dig this song. Nice Brian lead on this one. The guys fill in a really nice bouncy arrangement. Another mix of chimes throughout the solo. It's just a cool little song. It sticks in your head. Nice sweet melody, something simple, nothing too crazy. The complete opposite of what Lonely Sea would have been. But cool song nonetheless. Surf Jam. I love the raucous pounding drums on this thing, the real like caveman style drums, and then Brian just like screaming at the guys to like stay in time and like they let loose and just have a good time and jam. It's in a 12-bar blues kind of style setup, but like you get that real chugging, heavy rhythm, excellent guitar, and it's just such a youthful, lively track. You can tell they were kids. You can tell they were having fun. They were in a grown-up recording studio. They had big-time amplifiers and cool guitars. They were making the big sounds that they heard and that they saw, and they were doing it their own way. And of course that's exciting, and of course that's going to get caught on tape, and of course it's going to sound fun, and it does. Their instrumentals that they wrote, I think, are way better than their instrumentals that were covers. That said, Let's Go Trippin', the next song on here is the Dick Dale classic. And they would do this again on their live album a couple years later, or I guess like a year and a half later. The energy on this track is absolutely amazing as well, and I think the guitars totally come across with that wet, reverbed, drenched sound that sound like they're caught in a wave. I don't know how they pulled that off, but like that metallic style of playing, that the way you can kind of pick and mute and bend and hit the strings a little bit with your pick. There's a whole style to making that sound happen, and they are perfect on this album, showing off that whole style. And then Finders Keepers, the last song on this album, I think is a fun way to end it. You get a lot of vocal interplay and some really interesting time signature changes that, again, come out of nowhere. So you got kind of a loose, bouncy thing, and then it stops. And then you got this other bouncy thing that happens, completely in a different arrangement, with a bit of a pre-chorus that is somewhere else. So again, here we have Brian constructing songs out of nowhere. There's like multiple time changes, and it all works. He's a genius at making things like that work. Just fantastic, and I think they pull it off perfectly. They're so tight as a band at this point because they're playing shows all the time and they're jamming all the time. So they learned how to play off each other really well. But here's the back cover here. Love the pictures of the guys. You get a little bit of a write-up explaining what, like a moondoggie is and, surfs up and all this other kind of stuff. Let me show you the label. So here you go. An original mono pressing. It's also a little bit scratchy, but yeah, it's better than nothing. I'm not sure exactly which pressing this is. If it's a first or a second, I'll have to double check. But it's definitely an early mono pressing. I also want to show you this. This is a early 70s reissue. So you got the Gold Record Award stamp there, and the bar is missing, so it's just blue on the top and the bottom. But check this out. I've always enjoyed this. Look at that yellow capital label. Whoa, that is bright. Let me back off there. There we go. Look at that yellow capital label with like an orange capital stamp. And it literally looks like a stamp. Like the ink on this thing just looks like it wasn't that good. Yeah, it just says Beach Boys, Surfin U.S.A. Not even the Beach Boys. But always thought that was kind of unique. I'm guessing with that label, that's gotta be from the early 70s. So yeah, anyways, I really, truly dig this album. I think it's an absolute blast to listen to. This is a super long video. I didn't think the video was going to be this long. So if you're still watching, thank you. And let me know what you think of this thing. If I had to give it a rating, I'd probably give it an 8 out of 10. It's super fun. It's the guys all together. What you hear on the album is the Beach Boys. They're all playing the instruments. They're all writing the songs. For the most part, everything's done in-house still. And that's it. It's just an absolute great album. It's an album that deserves the recognition that it does and really showcases them playing their guitars. It's a guitar album. There's some good vocals on here, but it's a guitar album. And if you were a kid in 1963 buying this thing, you'd want to go out and buy a guitar so you can make this sound happen. I would have done the same thing. I would have learned how to play Surf Jam and Stoked over and over again, and try to figure out how they did it. So, my name is Giggens. This has been a really long review of the Beach Boys' Surfin' U.S.A. album. I want to know what you guys have to say about it, because I haven't touched the early Beach Boys stuff yet, but I'm getting into it. I'm making videos anyway. I love the early stuff. I love all the Beach Boys stuff, let's just be honest. But this was a lot of fun to make, so let me know what you think of the album. I'd be super curious to know your thoughts. And that's it. 8 out of 10. My name is Giggens. This has been the Beach Boys Surfin' USA album review. And I'll see you guys next time. Have a good one. Surf's up.